it's time to go through your comments. In a video I was really interested on hearing you guys' input in was this video I did about the draft. Everything you know about the draft is a lie, where I basically did some research, some empirical research from 2013 to 2017. Looked at a bunch of different things about the draft. So here's everything I charted. I charted draft picks, head coach changes, GM changes, win percentage, Pro Bowl hit percentage, Pro Bowlers selected within that time period, extension hit percentage, extensions, top 100 picks, top 100 pick, Pro Bowl hit percentage, top 100 Pro Bowls, so Pro Bowlers selected within the top 100, top extension hit percentage, top extension, top 10 picks, top 10 Pro Bowl percentage, so on and so forth. I also did leading passers, top 5 quarterback, top 5 QB seasons, Super Bowl appearances as well. The reason I want to chart all this is I wanted to see if there was any correlation between how many picks you have and your draft success, and also how many regime changes you have in draft success, because I think those two are kind of thought of in opposite ways, where if you're not happy with your GM, you want him fired, right? If you're not happy with the draft, you want him fired. That's going to be better. Or if you're not happy with the coaching job, you want that coach fired. But is that actually a successful strategy? I looked into that, and there was a lot of comments that, you know, had some rebuttals to the thing, and I'm going to provide my rebuttal to that with evidence. This one from a user, A, says, I think you left some key points out. A team creates a draft board of maybe 125 players. They don't do the work on just 8 or so picks. They have to look at everyone on their board, and they don't know who will be there when they pick, whether they have 7 or 14 picks. The work is probably the same. Then about a team who really likes, then what about a team who really likes a player, moves up to get them? If their work was so good, if their work was good, they get a player, now less picks, and the team that traded now has more picks. When the Browns traded back last year, they potentially get, well, one, you ran into the point by arguing against my point here, which was less picks usually means more draft success. Now, you don't just magically get less picks, right? You usually give up picks to either move up or to get players that aren't in the draft. But the point still remains. The less picks you have, the more likely you are to be successful in the draft. That's not my opinion. That is what the number shows through all 32 teams, is that the teams with the less picks, on average, draft more Pro Bowlers, hit on a higher percentage of their picks, and hit on a higher percentage of extension players. That's just the truth out there. Now, one of the reasons that happens is because, yes, trading up does help your odds because you're getting more picks there. Now, one thing to note is that it's not like there's a big discrepancy in the top 100. And so 4 teams who had more picks, they still picked in the top 100 more often. 4 teams with less picks, they picked 21 picks they average. For teams that had the less picks than average, and then teams that had more picks than average, 22 top 100 picks. So those teams are still picking more in the top 100. So teams that accumulate a lot of picks have a broader ideal of what premium picks are. They say premium picks are top 100 picks. And there is some evidence to prove that I think 80% of all Pro Bowlers selected in the NFL draft and from 2013 to 2019 were top 100 picks. They're still not hitting at a good rate with that strategy, even though they average one more top 100 pick than the teams that pick less. And the reason is the teams that pick less value top 10 picks. They're willing to trade up into the top 10 to get less picks, but get the guys that they want. So that is a factor in there. Another factor in there is what you said about the draft board, right? That somebody's only going to have like 185 players and that they're going to be selecting from that pool. Sure, you can look at it like, I would say this. If you look at 185 players to draft 8 picks, Once you have 13, that's going to become a bigger pool of players you're going to have to look at. And it changes your mentality on each pick, because when you have 6 or 7 picks, each pick is very important. You're making these decisions and you're arguing through these decisions thoroughly. When you have 13 picks, you're just trying to get through it. And if you don't think this happens, think about every single fantasy football draft you've been in where, like, hey, if you have like a draft where you're getting like 12 picks, you're really intent on making sure that you bring in the right players. But when you got them like 45 round fantasy drafts, once you get past round 10, you just picking dudes. Because you got so many of these picks, it overwhelms you mentally. Again, nothing suggests that having more picks makes you more successful at the draft. And that was the point that I was trying to get home, is that this ideal that more swings at selecting players is going to get you more good players is just a false notion. It's not true. It's not backed up by any evidence. What is backed up is trading up is good, is getting picks in the top 10, obviously, is good. And even if you can get more picks in the top 100, that doesn't even mean anything for your draft strategy. Because, again, teams that pick more in the top 100 probably switch out coaches more, probably have staffs. Again, if you don't have the environment to nurture and develop these picks, the picks mean nothing. The amount of picks mean absolutely nothing. And that's my point. And I think more teams should understand that and stride for stability more than they're striding for these gimmicky things to get around draft odds. When you just can't beat the odds, you ultimately, football's a simple game. Got to play good, got to win games, got to draft well. And in order to draft well, you got to have stability. Chris Boom said, I'd be curious to see if the data shows the teams with the less amount of coach and GM changes have had a better Pro Bowl and extension hit rate. Chris is onto something here, right? Because, again, in this chart, I categorized the amount of success versus what your head coaching turnover looked like, right? Because the truth of the matter is that teams don't really change out general managers that much. I think the league average is less than 1 from 2013 to 2019. Teams don't really change out GMs like that. Yes, there are teams like the Browns and the Jets that have had 3, the Commanders, the Texans, but by and large, most teams have 1 or less GMs, as you can see here. So executive turnover, it's not happening at a high enough rate to where I think that matters. But what does happen at a high enough rate to where I think it becomes significant is head coaching changes, because there's a ton of head coaching changes every year, right? Now, I looked at this from the ideal of, okay, what are the teams that have had 4 or more? There were 2 teams that had 4 or more. So those are the outlier teams. And then we can look at the teams that just had a lot, right? There's a bunch of teams that had 3 head coaching changes. There's a bunch of teams that had 2 head coaching changes. And there's a bunch of teams that had 1 head coaching changes and a bunch of teams that had 0. So the vast majority of the league, the majority of the league, two coaching changes within those 7 years. The outliers are like the Browns and the Cardinals with 4. And you see how that doesn't necessarily correlate with GM changes? Because, again, GM changes, I don't think they mean as much as people want them to mean. But head coaching changes, there's definitely a correlation there, right? So you can see head coaching changes. You can see the amount of teams that do this. More teams have 1 head coach or none or no head coaching changes than like 3. So the crazy turnover that we're used to as Browns fans, it's a good reminder that that stuff's not normal. But when we get into the meat and bones of this, right, and we look at what the head coaching changes mean for your draft success, and it's interesting, right? Because there's not really a pick correlation outside of the outliers. And even then, right, teams that have 4 head coaches average pretty much the same amount of draft picks that the teams that have had 1 head coach. So again, the number of draft picks doesn't necessarily correlate with how many coaches you have. It's definitely a strategy from the front office. And then you can see win percentage here. It's like, okay, of course the teams that have 4 head coaches are terrible. But then it kind of flattens out from the teams that have had a lot in some head coaching changes. If you had 1 head coaching change, you're usually much better off. And if you had no head coaching changes, you're usually a pretty good team. 8 teams had no head coaching changes. Those 8 teams won 63% of their games on average. So that's something to look at when it comes to Pro Bowl hit percentages, right? How often were teams of that didn't change coaches a lot hitting on Pro Bowlers? This is what's interesting about it. If you change your coach a ton, you were not very likely. If you change your coach some, you were just about average at getting Pro Bowlers. The teams that change their head coaches a lot and the teams that change their head coaches none, they did very good in selecting Pro Bowlers. The teams that actually did a lot actually did better, right? But what's interesting is that still realistically, that's about a 7 average, and then that's about 7. So you're getting 7 Pro Bowlers. And again, the pick differential is not that much, 52 to 54. The teams with no head coach are actually selecting more often here, right? So the percentage is less impressive, even though they're getting more good players here. The extension hit percentage is where you start to see a big difference here in stability when it comes to what that means for a team. Is you're going to have more solid players as well. So 31%, the highest out of all of them. Again, either you want to be getting guys in and out according to this chart. Obviously, it's not the Bible or anything like that. But either you want to be you don't want to be in halfway zone is basically what the numbers say. Either you stick with the guy or you don't. But you don't want to be in this like half measure. We're kind of keeping a guy. You either commit to a guy or you don't. That's basically the idea. Top 100 picks are pretty much the same across the board, except for teams that have had a ton of head coaching changes. That's obvious. That's a draft strategy. And it's interesting to me that if we go to leading passers, this is where things get interesting. So you're more likely to be successful with your picks if you have less head coaches. You're also much more likely to have less leading passers over a 7-year span if you don't switch head coaches. Now, some will say, does the quarterback lead to that versus the coaching leading to that? And I will say, the better you are at drafting, the more likely it is that when a quarterback becomes available that could be good and could fit what you do, you don't miss him, right? You don't miss these guys. Again, teams that have had a lot of turnover, they do terrible here. But I mean, the teams that have had some turnover do about the same. Teams that don't have a better chance. So I guess the point of the video, and look, I'm going to make a more clear, concise video with like graphics and stuff, so you don't have to look at this Excel sheet all the time. But the teams that don't get gimmicky with it tend to be the teams that are successful. This is not a complicated game. I think we make it complicated, but it's not that complicated. Jeremiah says, I don't know if that has to do with quality of picks and the quality of stability in the front office. See, you can't use Jimmy Johnson as like, Jimmy Johnson had a lot of picks and it worked out. So nothing else can be true because, again, that's not empirical. That's anecdote. So no, like, yeah, it worked out for Jimmy Johnson for the vast majority of people. Having a ton of picks did not make them more successful at drafting. It actually did the opposite. So again, you can try to cheat the draft, but the draft cannot be cheated. You ultimately have to be good at this. Ravi says, Q, love the vids, but a few flaws with this. Teams with more picks could have more or less picks of less value. That's not true. Yes, teams that have had less picks do draft in the top 10 more often. They trade up more often. But the teams with more picks are also drafting way more players in the top 100. So it's not junk percentage that was shown. That doesn't skew anything. The next video, I just want to talk about this real quick, was the engraving video situation. No, the update is he's still trying to work this situation out. It's a tough situation for him. And again, I just urge you guys to show him some support, show him some love. Make sure you go to Engraving's channel and show support however you can. The NFL Combine is outdated video that I dropped the other day. One of the comments there says the combine needs an update. It's not worthless. Some drills are useful for wide receivers. Others are good for DTs. Some should be dropped and added. They should all relate to what the position you. That's basically what I said in the video. So I agree with that. You know, I think the combine, it's a lot of testing that is somewhat useful, but I think you can make it way more useful. Again, I'm not saying it's useless, but I am saying it's not as good as it should be. And when you're the NFL and you have the money to do all this stuff, you should try to make these processes as useful as possible. This video was about the Browns being graded by the NFLPA. Matt Liberator says around the time they changed the name of the facility to Cross Country, Haslam brought a bunch of land near it, so I'm expecting them to do something with it in the near future. Yeah, man, I have no idea. Like, the Haslams are clearly planning something. Some people think that they might be like trying to build the stadium in Berea, which logistically would be a nightmare. Like, it's already tough getting in and out of that airport area. If they added football games there, like, I don't know, man, that might. Because the thing about, if you're not like living in Cleveland or never lived in Cleveland, but you're a Browns fan and watch this channel, or you're not even a Browns fan, you're just somebody who's curious and watching this channel. The thing about that area in Berea is, like, it's not a big town and it's not in Cleveland. Like, it's a good 10 with traffic, 15 to 18 minutes away from like downtown Cleveland. So it's not really built for a lot of traffic. It's a small town, like it's a small college town. Baldwin Wallace is there. And when training camp comes every year, it is a disaster to move around there. The infrastructure's not there. They don't have enough parking. You see a lot of people just like parking on grass. It's not necessarily built for the 5,000 people that show up for training camp on like a weekend day. So when you add that, you might be trying to make the facility bigger and you might be trying to accommodate more people, or like if their plan is, hey, if the city doesn't want to allow us to build a new stadium where that is, and like, let's say the Browns did want to build a new stadium where the current one is. The big question is, like, where are the Browns going to play for the 3 years that they're building that stadium? Because there's not really an NFL level facility. Like, you could play at the Hall of Fame, but like, that would be weird because the Hall of Fame is only like a 30,000 seat facility, and it would be the Chargers playing in that like soccer stadium vibes. I don't think the NFL wants that. Again, even though they do play the Hall of Fame game there, I just don't think they want home NFL games there. So like, then you're talking about maybe Ohio Stadium in Columbus, which is like 4 hours away from the city of Cleveland. Like, it's a completely different part of Ohio. That's the issue that the Browns are running up against, is like, if they want to build the stadium where that ground is, they're going to have to find somewhere to play. If not, they can't really build a stadium next to it where the stadium currently is, because I think there's an airport there, and there's a dock on the other side that, like, I think the city owns both of them, or somebody. It's not something that they could just buy up. So if he's trying to buy up the land to make the facility better, whatever, as long as those people whose houses got bought got fairly compensated, I have no problem with it. If he is trying to buy the land to build a stadium in Berea, boy, I hope they did a lot more planning than just plopping a stadium there, because that is close enough to the city to where it's hard to adjust the infrastructure to accommodate 70,000 people. Like the Bills can do it because like the Bills play like 20 minutes outside of Buffalo, and they can just pretty much build whatever they need to accommodate that there. Berea is its own city, and it's close enough to the city where there's not that much space. Like there is space, but there's not that much space. And I don't know. That sounds like something that could be a disaster logistically. Now, are they going to care? No, because people are going to buy tickets. People are going to show up and people are going to put up with it. But like, I would hate for the fan experience to get better in one way because they build a dome and it's more of a better weather there because they build a dome and it's better weather and you don't have to worry about freezing your butt off at the stadium anymore. But then they make it a complete pain to get there because like the benefits that the current stadium has is that public transit, there's an easy way to go in and out. When I had season tickets in 2019, I rode public transit all the time there. You can take the rail and it'll take you right there to the stadium. So not everybody who gets to the stadium has to use a car. So instead of having 70,000 people come and let's say about 50,000 people are coming by car, it's like 70,000 people come, but maybe 20 or 30,000 of those people are probably riding through rail and parking somewhere else that's not in downtown itself to save some money and to save some time because it's just a pain in the ass to get out of downtown in a car at their game. So that is something I worry about because like Berea that is a lot of people to bring to Berea if they're trying to build the stadium there because Berea is just kind of a neighborhood and that would be a little awkward, but we'll see what Jimmy's plan is. But they're clearly trying to do something, right? He's clearly trying to put money into the facility. He's clearly trying to get a new stadium. All of these things are very clear if you listen to how the Haslams have talked and moved. They want something new there, whether it is renovating massively what's already there or just building something new. And I believe the Haslams want to build something new. But building something new is a logistical nightmare because of all of the things that I've factored in. Now, there may be some other workarounds, I'm sure, but the biggest problem for them is if they want to build on that land that they already own, they can't play there while that's being torn down. Where do the Browns play? There's nowhere that's really suitable. Because like, unlike, Minnesota was able to do this because the University of Minnesota had a stadium that they could use that was NFL quality. The Browns in the city of Cleveland, like there's no big college. Like Akron's not a big enough school and you can't host the NFL game at Akron University or Kent State or anywhere like that. Like none of those have NFL level facility. Even the Bengals have a UC, which now if they needed to build a new stadium, they could play at UC for a year or two. There's nothing that size in that Northeast Ohio area when it comes to a football stadium. And that's a big problem for the Browns when it comes to building a new stadium. So then you're talking about finding somewhere to build it, and finding somewhere to build it is also tough because, it's there's not really a ton of space there to take up. Now they'll find space, they'll make space. It's just there's nowhere that's going to be convenient for people to really build that stadium to get in and out to if it's not going to be where it is. And they can't really build it where it is because of everything else that I mentioned. Again, for that stadium to get built where it was, the team had to be out of the NFL for 4 years. So there's a lot there. I'm interested to see how the Haslams navigate it, but they're clearly trying to build something new, in my opinion. But that's it for the commentary of this week. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Y'all have a great day. Have a good night.